So we're now going to put the top deck in place, and that also means putting in the steering servo. So with this car, the steering servo has to go in first. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to mount the steering servo in preparation to go into the car. In this case, it goes into the bottom of the set of screws, and we're going to use servo mounting screws such as these. These are original Thunder Tiger servo mounting screws. As you can see, they're a little bit rusty, but they'll do the job for this particular rebuild. They've got plenty of life in them yet, and that should allow us to put the steering servo in place when we put the deck onto the car. You'll see as we progress through this, you'll see that it's incredibly difficult to get the steering servo in place once the deck is in place. So by doing it this way, it makes life a lot easier. The other servo, the one that we use for the throttle and the brake, can go in later on. That's not so much of a problem because that actually slides in from the top. But this particular one is a bit of a nuisance. So we'll make sure we get this one in place before we start. Okay, so you can see here that I've positioned the servo horn, if you like, the actuator, the white splined. Hang on a moment. There we go. The white spline lever, we positioned it to the middle of the car, and that's then going to line up with the servo horn, which is this bit here that goes on there. So in order to put this in place, and I'll try and show you this in as delicate a way as possible, this part here has to go over the drive belt, the rest of it goes under, and this bit here has to go into the between the engine and the carburetor, as I showed you in the previous video. So we're going to put this in place. That's now over the drive belt. That's almost in place there. The servo horn is going to go on, and this is the reason why we center the servos first, because by centering the servos we can position the servo horn so that it is exactly upright. If it's exactly upright in that position, then the steering is straight, which is as we set it when we centered the servos. There we are, that's done. So that's the steering pretty much straight on there. The one thing I don't have is a screw for the servo horn, so I'll pull it out in just a moment, and we'll grow that in just a moment. But just prior to doing that, let's put this in place like this. Here we go, that's 1, 2. In fact, I need the screw now, because if I don't, I won't get it in a moment. So bear with me, I will find the servo screw. And as they say, here's one I prepared earlier. So there we are, one servo screw. So let's put that in place now, before we can go any further, because I shall need to push this out to one side like that in order to get it in. And you can see now that the servo horn has turned, so it's no longer central. I don't know if you can see that in there. It's no longer central, but at this point it doesn't matter because it's in position. So when we turn the servos on later on, then it will automatically centralize itself, which is what we want it to do. So let's put it back up to the top there, and then we can put the deck back into position. So this deck has several mounting points: 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and then some at the back here, 7, 8. These two at the back here are long countersunk screws. So we'll do the ones at the front first. And here we go, 1, 2, 3, make sure it's in position, 4, and then we'll come along to the rest of them in a minute. Now you'll also notice while I'm screwing these in at the front, if you look very carefully, you can see here are some little adjusters. These are little tiny clips that go onto the front of the wishbone mounting bar, and they allow you to adjust where the bar sits. So for racing conditions, for example, you can take the clip off and put it to the front and lay the wheel slightly back. So let me just show you what I mean. If I take these clips off now, use a pair of pliers to do it. There we are. There we are, 1, 2, 3 clips. They come off. The wishbone can now slide back, which gives you a laid back front end, which allows the wheel to have far more camber if you wish it. But for normal driving operation, you'd normally have it forwards. These clips are incredibly difficult to get hold of. Now, I can supply these. I have a 3D printer, and I actually print them on my 3D printer. So if you get stuck finding any of those, then by all means contact me. I've got them for sale on eBay. But yeah, they're brand new and they're printed on 3D. So there we are. That's the first 4 screws in. We'll come back now to the middle 2, sorry, 1, 2, which go onto the bar that retains the the drive belt, the central drive belt. There we are, 1, 2. And then just before we put the last 2 in, which are these 2 at the back here, I'm going to slide this in. This is the brake actuator, and it has to sit into a hole in the bottom. So if this doesn't go in correctly, the flat bit goes against the brake disc, but if it doesn't go in correctly, then we won't have brakes. And a car without brakes is not where we want to be. So let's make sure we can get it into the hole correctly. Come on, in you go, that's it. And I may have to just give it a little push from underneath just so we can see. You can see there the hole it's got to recess into. And I'm just looking for the, there we are, come on, in you go. This is always very difficult to do, so if you try and do this yourself and you have problems, don't worry about it. Everybody has problems with this bit because it's just a matter of lining it up with the hole underneath. And rather than, there we are, so rather than waste time on the video, if I can't do it fairly quickly, I'll do it offline and then come back and talk to you then. But let's see what we can do first. So I'll just put it in here. Come on. There we go, it's in. And you can see there, it's just in position there. Okay, so there we are, that's my brake actuator. So we now have brakes on the car as well, which is what we need. The 2 countersunk screws go in the back here, 1 and 2. And you can see now the car's coming together very well, and it looks a lot cleaner than it was when we first started this operation, which, if you can remember, was a very dirty car. In fact, some people would say it's almost irredeemable because it was so filthy dirty, but I don't give up very easily, so it makes it nice and simple. So there we are, that's the top deck in place. We're not quite finished yet because underneath we do need to put 2 countersunk screws in, 1 and 2, which just retain the top deck from underneath. So we'll put those in very quickly. 1 in there and 1 on the other side. There we go, and there we are, and that's now in place. Now what we can do is we can put the central drive belt tensioner on, which pulls the whole lot together, if you like. Before we do anything else, we'll do that next. So that's very simple. The first thing we need to do is put the drive belt on, and don't forget the engine is still loose, so that's okay. So let's try and make it so you can see it. Put the drive belt on, 1, 2, and just wind it over. Come on, in you get. There we are, and that's in position. And then all we need to do is we take this, the bearings go on the inside, the washers go on the outside, we clip it into position, and this should provide tension to the drive belt when it's in position. There we go, just like that. And then it's just 2 circlips that go onto the front mountings here and here. Oh dear, then here and here. So let's give that a go. So I'll find the 2 circlips that go in there. Here's one. I appear to have lost the other one, so I'll come back and find that in just a moment, but don't worry, I won't forget about it. That's quite an important piece of equipment, that. So we'll just clip one on for now, just hold it in position. That's what you call preparation, you see. I should have found it and been prepared for it, shouldn't I? There we are. And now we've got tension. So now by turning this drive belt, it now turns the front and the rear drive shaft. So we've now got a 4-wheel drive car. Now from here we can now tension the engine, and if you've seen my video on spur gear adjustment, then that's the spur gear there, and you can see here the engine's wobbly. So all we need to do is we need to tighten this up so that it's tight against the spur gear, but not too tight that it causes too much friction. If it's too tight, it'll very, very quickly wear the spur gear out. If it's too loose, it'll strip it, and that's not what we want. So we'll just make sure that's nice and tight. So all I do is I put it in and then just release it slightly and see where we are. And as you can see there, that's a nice tight spur gear, but there's still just a little bit of movement there, which is what we want. So there we are, the spur gear is in place. So from here we'll go ahead and we'll put the petrol tank in and make sure the petrol tank is well aligned before we go ahead and put things like the exhaust in. In fact, I've just had a thought, before we put the petrol tank in, we're going to put the exhaust mounting in, because otherwise it's extremely difficult to get hold of. To get into position. So this is the exhaust mount, and this is going to go in. I'm going to put a screw up underneath the chassis for that, and the exhaust mount has a little clip which pops into a hole and holds it in position. So that's all we need there. This is hard enough to get into position without the fuel tank in, so with the fuel tank it makes it even worse. I'm going to use my trusty tool for this, he says. My trusty tool being hopefully a nut holder, or better still, a better position. That might be easier, mightn't it? Let's try this and see. You would think something like this would be very easy to put on, wouldn't you? It's amazing how difficult it can be when it wants to be. So let's use a nut runner for this. So this is just an RC nut tool. I'll put the nut into position, there we are, and we'll hold it in place there, while indeed we get a screwdriver underneath, and hopefully that should screw down. If I've got it right, it'll work. If I've got it wrong, it won't. And I can feel it getting tight, which is a good sign. Means, come on, in you get. Means you've got it right. There we are. Now I just need to tighten it up now, because that was just out of position slightly, but it's on the nut, which is what we need it to be. So let's finish it off. So it's in position. There we are. Now that's it. And as you can see there, the exhaust clip is now in position. So now we can put the fuel tank in. And the fuel tank, this again you have to be really, really careful with. So the screws, in fact I've got one there. Let me just grab two more for my trusty little box. One and two. No, you'll see what I mean in a moment. Okay. So if I grab two more from my trusty little box, this again is very important. We need to make sure that these are not too long, because the Thunder Tiger fuel tank is positioned in such a way that it doesn't have external mountings. If you use screws that are too long, you'll drive them into the tank, and once you've punctured the tank, there's no coming back. You cannot, it is simply not possible to repair a punctured fuel tank. And believe me, I've tried on several occasions, I've used loads of different stuff, I have never got one to repair correctly, so we just don't bother. We just leave it and put a new one in if we ever puncture it. So in fact I've got 3 screws out for this. In this case I only need 2 because this tank only has 2. Some of the TS4Ns have a little plate just over the tank here to protect it, like a black plate. This particular one doesn't have one. The later ones have one. So if you have a plate, then by all means put it in place. It will certainly help to protect the tank. In reality it's going to take quite a bump to go through there, but if you want the protection, there's no harm in putting it in place. There we are, and that's the fuel tank in place, and you can see now the car is beginning to come together quite well. So from here I'm just going to mount the suspension. I'm not going to keep the video running to do that, but the suspension very simply bolts on between here and here. Okay, so the front suspension will go on between there and there, for example, and on the rear. So I'm going to go ahead and do that now, and then we'll come back and do the rest of the video as soon as I put the suspension in. Okay.